Hey everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Birds of a Feather Talk Together. This week we are talking about the Gambel's quail. This is a bird that Amanda and I saw on our recent trip to Sedona, and since John is from Arizona, we thought this would be a fun bird to discuss. It's our first quail episode, so it's super interesting to dive into talking about this bird and learn more about it from John and Shannon. From their Topknot to where the name Gambel came from and who exactly the bird was named after, there's a lot to discuss. We also answer a mailbag question on owl pellets from a flower farm in Illinois. Okay, go grab your binoculars and let's get into it.
Well, it happens every time, so it is part of the routine at this point, isn't it?
It's your love language.
Something like that.
Well, so do you want to talk about Gambel's quail then?
Yeah, let's do Gambel's quail first.
Okay. So I wanted to just kick it off real quick with why we picked Gambel's quail. So we just got back from that trip to Sedona, but a week before that we went to the Brookfield Zoo with our Audubon group, and we did this whole thing on the Guam kingfisher, and we got to speak with like everybody there. And then afterwards, Amanda and I just walked around the Brookfield Zoo, and neither of us had been there since we were kids, and so we had a ton of fun just looking at everything. But we're looking at all the different birds, and we saw Gambel's quail at the Brookfield Zoo, and never expected to see him in the wild. And then we're in Sedona a week later. We're looking on eBird, realized that they were in the area, but didn't really think we'd see them. And we're out for just like a walk near like the hotel we were staying at, and three of them just ran past. And so we were obsessed and just followed them around for like a half hour after that, and then saw them multiple times after that. But it went from like a bird that we didn't know about to seeing it in the zoo to seeing it in the wild. So it was just like a really exciting like turn of events.
So
Yes.
talk a little bit about what kind of habitat you were in Sedona.
Yeah. So, it's very desert-like around there, but where we were was kind of up on this plateau that had more vegetation. So it was still very like desert-like, but there were kind of some bushes, some like smaller trees. And so they were running along just like in the, in the dirt or in the, on the ground of the desert or whatever. But there was one that sat up in the tree, and I think he might have been kind of on guard while the other ones were kind of running around. And we didn't realize that there was one in the tree, and walked past and kind of flushed it out, and it made a bunch of noise.
Oh,
But
cool.
yeah.
And it was
Yeah.
Our the place we stayed at, it was called Sky Ranch Lodge in Sedona, and it actually has like a little botanic garden on site. So there was tons of different types of plants and and lots of birds too. And in addition to our first sighting, and that was like at dusk, right, RJ? When we first saw him?
Yeah. It was like the sun was just kind of setting.
Yes.
And we were doing this little walk, and then they came out. It was funny. There was this other like family was walking by when we were there, and they thought, because they were running across the ground and were so fast, somebody shouted out, "Look, roadrunners!"
Yes.
Ah,
Yeah.
And we
And
at first
they
thought
were
it was, and then we
fast.
were like, "Oh
Yeah.
no!" We saw their little top knot and realized that it
Yes.
was quail. So
Yeah. And it was so cool. Like RJ said, we had seen them in the zoo the week before, and they're totally zoo worthy. Like they're really exciting looking. And then, to see them in the wild was like, oh my gosh, this is so cool.
yeah.
I don't think I've ever seen them in a zoo, which is really that's. But
Yeah.
you're right. They would be perfect because they're such
Yeah.
a cool looking bird.
Yeah.
They are so cool. Yeah. And the second sighting we had of them was in this resort, had kind of, like RJ said, it was on a plateau right by an airport, like a tiny, small plane private airport. And so it was, on all sides of this plateau, it was kind of like cliffs or real, like steep descents, I should say. And there was a area kind of away from the main resort. It was kind of in a hidden area, but it had a
It was
brush
behind
pile.
it was behind the dumpster.
Let's put it that way. That's where it was. It was
We were the only
Hey,
people at our resort
hey,
that were hanging out by the dumpster looking for birds.
You guys are birders now.
Yes.
It's like some of those places
Thanks,
are the
Jen.
best places to look. Nobody else
you-
goes
Yes.
there. It's like
When you plan your
Yeah.
trips around the sewage ponds, you've now really arrived.
That's awesome. Thank you guys. That makes us feel cool. Yeah. So this they had a brush pile behind the dumpsters, and that's where we had a ton of great bird sightings and saw the quails the second time. So it was so cool.
excellent.
I don't have much
Yeah.
experience with Gambel's quail. California quail more than Gambel's quail. So they're each other's closest relatives, part of the scaled quail group of birds. And they're so pretty. And they're so cute with their little top knots, their little feathers, all these not really fused, but they stick together really tightly. The little feathers on the top of their heads that are shaped like a comma. Really adorable. But John, you must have
So-
spent quite a bit of time with them growing up, right?
Well, I was going to say that where you are in Sedona, up in sort of north central Arizona, is kind of at the upper end of the elevational range that they have. I think of them as being a bird of what they call the Sonoran Desert, which is this southern desert that goes down through Phoenix and Tucson and down into Mexico. And I've dealt with Gambel's quail my entire life. They're an awesome bird. And when I was doing my master's degree on the Gulf of California, they were along the coast and in the vegetation along the beaches down there too. So it's just they're a great bird and just really, I think, emblematic in a lot of ways of the Sonoran Desert for me.
So I had to look it up. And calopepla means callous or beautiful, and peplos, outer robe or shawl. So it's an ancient Greek
Oh.
thing, which I thought that was nice.
Very cool.
Yeah.
And we were looking. So do people actually call a top knot is like the name of what
Yeah.
we call like the feathers on top?
Yeah.
Is that I've always like this is so weird, but top knot I've always heard is like the hipster man bun haircut, like at the
Yeah. Same kind of thing,
Like that-
right?
like I didn't know. So that they didn't come up with that term. That comes from
No. That's a bird thing. And
That's
I
a bird
also had to
thing,
look
okay.
up what quail meant,
Mm.
which I also didn't know, but that now I do. So quail can mean outside of the bird. It can mean flinch, recoil, or wince. Those are synonyms. So what that bird did when you came up to it in the tree is what quails do, and is part of what the word quail means. So
Okay.
they kind of recoil, or they wince, or they flinch, just like that bird. And they do that too when you come up on them. They run away.
Or they wait till you're right on top of them and then they explode off and scare the
Yeah.
tar out of you.
It's scary.
Right. You
Yeah.
flush them. Yeah. Exactly.
But they're part of the pheasant and chicken family. There's a whole lineage of New World birds, New World quail-like birds that are different than the pheasants, and a whole bunch of Old World quail like francolin, and they're the kind of birds that people love to eat because they have a lot of meat on them, and they eat a lot of grain, and so they've always been hunted by people. I don't think people hunt a lot of Gambel's quail these days, but I'm sure some people still do.
Yeah.
They're kind of
You were
small.
talking about. Oh, I was going to say the same thing, Shannon. When I was looking up the description, there was a thing that said that they're volleyball-sized birds.
Yeah,
and
no way.
The ones we saw were not
Weren't that
volleyball-sized.
That's
yeah.
Is there different volleyballs in different parts of the world? Just like Chicago is famous for its silly sizes of softballs.
Yeah, the 16-inch. Yeah, these
Yeah,
are more like
there
a
you go.
regular size. Yeah.
That'll help listeners. It's a 16-inch softball size.
Yes.
It is more like
Listeners
that
from
than an
Chicago.
actual volleyball
Yeah.
size.
You're right.
Yeah.
It's a Chicago softball size. Yeah.
But do they grow larger, or I mean, I was just no.
No,
So
and
really,
and
okay.
actually, I think that's an interesting thing about that bird. There's some geographic variation. They don't get a whole lot farther north than where you guys were. They get up into southern Utah, in desert and stuff, and there are 4 subspecies recognized based on some pretty minor morphological differences. But I don't think there's much size variation.
Okay. And I wanted to ask you guys what, like, how many birds have this type of Topknot, and what is the purpose?
Well, we'll have to schedule another episode with Marky Muchler to talk about that, because that's what she wants to look at for her dissertation.
Oh, wow.
Oh,
Cool.
Yeah. What is a crest, which is actually not so easy. The idea that crests, which are so prevalent in birds, have never really been studied before or quantified or defined. I found that really interesting when she decided to start studying those. We know virtually nothing about how crests are made. We do know that they use them in displays, but we don't know if everything uses them in displays. So that must mean there's something at the base of those feathers enabling the bird to manipulate them, whether that's to raise them or to lower them or whatever. But we don't really know much about the morphology of them or how they came to be or how prevalent they are. So, you can have things, but that doesn't necessarily mean they use them.
I hear you.
No, so we put adaptive reasons on top of everything, but that doesn't necessarily mean there's an adaptive reason. There's drift and mutations that can produce things that don't really have adaptive significance necessarily.
And I don't feel like I know very much about how male Gambel's quails attract females. And that's surprising, because I think it implies they must not do anything all that fancy.
But it is really interesting. We have 178 of them, but
oh, wow.
The amount of hybridization between Gambels in California, for example, there's some interesting things that people who study them have had to say about speciation with respect to them, because they're in areas where the birds overlap. The birds have this antiphonal display or behaviors where the male will sing and then the female responds. And it turns out that there are differences between the songs, but that they don't care in areas of overlap, that they don't care which one is singing. So if you are a Gambel's quail and a female California quail responds to your breeding call like that, they'll get together and have a party. They're not that discriminatory at that. So you can get intermixing in a way that really tells you something about speciation, or how long it might take for gene pools to become isolated from each other, how frequently that happens, how geographically widespread it is. So that's an interesting thing. I'd never really thought about it like that before.
So they do overlap then with the California quail as far as their distribution?
Yeah. So I would say not all that much, but they do come together. So California quail's really well named. It's over on the coast of California. And I think of it as getting into places like what I would call the Mojave Desert in getting into southwestern or southeastern California. And Gambel's quail occurs in those areas too. And so those are the places where they start hybridizing.
More commonly with scaled quail, I guess, right? That would be
and
more commonly overlapping and intermixing.
It's still pretty narrow, because this is the thing I love about growing up in the Southwest, is these different deserts. So you've got the Mojave Desert in California, you've got the Sonoran Desert in southern Arizona, and then at the edge of southern Arizona, going east, you run into the Chihuahuan Desert. And scaled quail is a bird of these open grasslands of the Chihuahuan Desert.
And they don't have top knots.
Oh, interesting.
Okay.
Well, they actually, so it's funny, they don't, but they have crests. So they call them cotton tops because they have these elongated white feathers.
Huh.
Uh,
But it's definitely not a topknot.
okay.
And then there's even another species down in Mexico called elegant quail that's also known to hybridize with Gambel's quail. And so these birds definitely, I would say, overlap and hybridize, but it's still limited to the edges of these distributions, in my opinion.
We were looking just at the Gambel's quail, like at their distribution, and it's always like so fun when we're looking up a new bird or traveling somewhere to see like where they are and everything. And like a lot of times we try to figure out like what is kind of the like, I don't know, makes that distribution, if it's like a geographical boundaries or whatever. Like with the Gambel's quail, is there any ideas of like why it seems like a very specific area that they're in? But
I think quail are really so a couple of things about quail. One is almost all of them are going to be non-migratory taxa. So so their range is going to expand based on their ability to move into new habitats. And so I think Gambel's quail in particular, it's a bird of the Sonoran Desert first and foremost, and then it can move up into transition areas at higher elevations, like where you were in Sedona. I mean, I would say you guys are not in Sonoran Desert there, but then you get up into a place like St. George, Utah, and you get kind of a northern extension, probably as a result of the Colorado River Valley going all the way up into southern Utah. And so these deserts, you tend to think of them as patches, but they can also be a little bit mosaic along the edges where, for whatever reason, there are fingers of the different habitats that allow them to be colonized by Gambel's quails expanding out of those areas. So they get into southern Texas, for instance. So that's definitely upper Chihuahuan desert for the most part. And yet, they've managed to expand into that area.
And
They've
John,
been
do they
introduced
do-
to.
Oh,
Sorry, Amanda.
Oh,
ahead.
no, go ahead, Shannon.
They've been introduced. I didn't know this until we started looking at this on uninhabited Hawaiian islands, for example. I mean, what the heck are people doing? Why?
I know. Why was that? Was it for food or?
I don't
So
know.
my
It was introduced to other islands that have it's subsequently kind of gone extinct from in Hawaii as well, but it's kind of holding on. But I don't understand.
So I was saying I'd never seen them in captivity, but it's very clear that once you get them in captivity, they can breed pretty well, and they produce a lot of eggs. And if there's no predation and the chicks get reared up, you can suddenly have a whole bunch of Gambel's quail, and maybe you just talk to the U.S. government and say, let's put them someplace.
Okay.
Because they're
Like
cute?
Hawaii.
Because they're cute.
They're
Why?
adorable.
I don't understand. I don't get it.
Yeah, seriously.
I mean, maybe somebody thought that if you establish, the thing about Hawaii to me is, I think that it's crazy to think that would have been suitable habitat for them. Hawaii is, and so I don't know. It's, yeah.
I think a lot of surfers have top knots, and they thought the quails would fit in.
There
with
we
them.
go. It's all about the top knot.
Well, to Shannon's, because weren't they introduced to a mountain in Hawaii, like a volcano? I think maybe, and I'm wondering if that's like Sedona,
But their
So-
range in the U.S. overlaps so much with mesquite trees that
Oh,
no mesquite out there, right? I don't think they need to have mesquite per se, but their ranges overlap pretty dramatically.
mhm.
I don't know. Maybe Amanda. I don't.
It wouldn't
Yeah.
surprise me that there are mesquites in Hawaii too.
Oh, really?
But I also think that those kinds of suppositions, imply that all they care about is a mesquite, and that's almost certainly not true in their
Yeah.
native range.
So there's got to be something else that's limiting their ranges to so similarly. It's not like they nest in them or eat exclusively off of mesquites or anything like that. It's just if you overlay the one's distribution over the other, they match pretty well.
Mm.
So did you guys get any rain on your trip?
That's a
No,
good question.
we did
It
not.
snowed
There was,
before we
yeah,
got
it snowed.
there. Yeah.
I hate
So
winter.
so here's well, but this is Arizona, so the interesting thing for a place like Tucson is that they've had almost something like 280 days in a row without rain.
Mm.
And one of the things I find interesting about birds like this is that even though we were talking about them as small, they're actually plump,
Yeah.
pretty, chunky birds. And so
Meaty.
a lot of, those birds need to find water somewhere, and they can get some of it from their diet. But I've always thought that that's not true for all of it.
Mm-hmm.
But it's possible that the various cycles of aridity and lack of rain across these areas are a big aspect of controlling the populations and limiting where. I'm guessing with Gambel's quail, my guess is that temperature is a big limit to how far north they get and how high they get in various areas.
Okay.
And I wondered, Shannon and Jen, when Gambel's quails are moving around and going into different areas, is that on foot or do they use flying for that?
They run around together in groups. That's where covey comes from, right? They run around together in groups. So my guess is they're walking. Maybe they all get flushed up and move a little bit like that every once in a while, but I don't think of them as really powered flyers to go long distance on their wing. Do you, John?
Mm-hmm.
No, not at all. And yet at the same time, what has to happen is as young get old enough to go breed, they're probably going to have to go out and look for territories where they can actually find mates. And so both males and females eventually need to disperse a little bit. One of the things that's crazy about this bird, and I think we talked about this a little bit with mourning dove, is the average lifespan is listed as about 1.5 years.
Yeah, that's amazing to me.
That's so short.
And if you think about it, one of the things about being in the Sonoran Desert in these areas, there are multiple predators like coyotes and raccoons, bobcats, and so these things would be hunted by almost any mid-sized mammal that could get to them. And so I mean it's an interesting breeding strategy. So they lay a lot of eggs, and their chicks are precocial. It's one of my favorite words in ornithology, which means that the young hatch and are ready to get up and go, just like chicken chicks would be. And so they're just designed to have a fairly short lifespan and put out a bunch of chicks that they hope they get to raise to adulthood. And those birds have to move around a little bit, but I think most of it is running.
Okay. Okay. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Shannon.
No, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to ask if because they're on foot, is that why they're fatter?
I think some birds are just plumper than others. Lineage-specific things.
Yeah, whether they fly or not.
I don't know that anybody's ever studied that. I think that would be a really cool thing to study. So I would say there's no such thing as like that. I think the roadrunner example is really interesting that you guys brought up early on. Roadrunners are these like long, thin birds, and I would say that in the chicken-like birds, there's very few that aren't fairly chunky in a lot of ways. Mm-hmm. And so I think walking around, maybe you need the leg muscles. And I mean, it's funny, their breast muscles are big, but that's because they have this explosive flight that they use. And that's one of the reasons why they taste so good, because it's white meat as opposed to red meat. And that's a really interesting question, though. Yeah.
We can put that down so that one of the students thinks about it, because they're
Oh,
way more
awesome.
likely to answer these questions than we are these days. I also learned a new thing about them that I didn't really understand where the word came from, but they tidbit. You know, when you say you're going to get a tidbit of food or something like that. So
Yeah.
the male gives the female tiny pieces of food, and she responds by taking them as part of their courtship. So it's called tidbitting. I had
That's
no.
adorable.
I
I didn't know that was a real expression.
No, all I know
Yeah.
about are Timbits.
Exactly. Did
Yeah,
you
but
say Timbits?
Timbits, yeah, the Tim
The
Hortons,
Tim Hortons.
little donuts.
That's our Canadian influence.
Trying to,
coming.
yeah,
For
sliding
sure.
in my Canadian reference there.
And hockey
That one went over my
reference.
head. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I love tidbitting. That's so cute. It's adorable. Wait, so is that a bird behavior? I've never heard it either.
Yeah.
I've never
well,
heard that.
That's
what it happens between them is called tidbitting.
that is so
I
cute.
wonder if that comes from the captive bird trade for those things or something that they
Oh.
get
I
to
don't
watch.
know. I
I don't
didn't
know.
look up when it was
Mhm.
first. I did not look up when it was first used.
Hmm.
That would be an interesting
So-
thing to know.
So cute.
So I read something that was really cool about them, but I'm not sure how common this is. Maybe a lot of birds do it, but Amanda and I saw that it said just before their eggs hatch, the female Gambel's quail calls to the chicks, who cheep to each other from inside the eggs. The eggs hatch at the same time then, and the chicks cut out a neat hole in the largest part of the shell and leaving an intact piece of membrane to serve as a hinge. The chick pushes on the shell and opens the door that it has created. So we thought that was so cool that
So cool.
the mom calls to the chicks and that they all call to each other.
Yeah, and I think the selection pressure there is they can't afford to take a lot of time to come out of those eggs, and so that's why it's so synchronized. There's a lot of evolutionary pressure to do that and get up and go.
You don't want to
Otherwise-
be the last one that comes out of the egg, right? So
Oh, okay.
they might be putting 18 eggs or out at one time, and that's a lot of reproductive output for the female.
Mhm.
And
Mm.
she wants to have the most survive that can, and the best way to do that is their safety in numbers. If you put them out one at a time, a wily snake is or something like that is just going to sit there one day after another day after another day and feast for 2 weeks. So you put them all at once and hope they can scatter to the winds, which is why they run around at first, right? So if that's your reproductive strategy, to put a lot out, you expect a lot to die, so that you have to put a lot out to have a few get through that the rigor of their very beginning. So that's the precocial, and altricial is the other one. Humans are altricial by far, the most altricial things, to look after their offspring, put all their effort into one or a few offspring. That's when they come out completely helpless, they're called altricial. So you can either put a whole bunch out, or you can put a lot of energy into one and hoping you get the same reward for your effort, I suppose. But yeah, most, I don't know about all, but are most galliforms or all galliforms precocial?
all galliforms are precocial.
Mm.
Yeah, so I think it's a really old strategy from an evolutionary standpoint.
And then when they're all, if they have a bunch of eggs like that, do they all stay together for a long time? Like when we saw,
Yeah,
we only
they
saw
do.
three at a time, but it seemed like that they actually live in bigger groups than that normally.
So they're birds like Canada geese do the same thing. So they're also precocial, ducks and geese, and you can get these I think what happens is the family groups can start combining, moving together as groups too. So if you have 10 to 12 chicks in a nest, they can combine up with another brood after they've hatched, and so you'll get these what they call coveys of quail that can have 30 or 40 birds in them.
Oh,
Oh
wow.
wow.
Amazing.
Oh, that'd be cool to see.
It is.
Yeah.
It's really neat.
That's so cool.
So I went down a couple of unexpected for me, well, maybe not rabbit holes in this, and when I wanted to see how many we had, so I downloaded from our database and I started looking at who collected them. And the first, there was a whole bunch of them that were collected by H.W. Marsden. Do you know his story, John?
No.
Oh, so I looked him up. And those are from Maricopa County, which is what made me look at them, because given that that's where you just were, I started looking at the records more closely. And he was a natural history agent in the UK, and he, as a dealer supplying specimens and prepared labels for collectors. So he has a book that came out. What is the year? I can't remember the year, 1880 something. It's called The Graduated List of British Birds for Labeling Eggs. And it's a list of British birds where and he says you should use a knife, not scissors, to cut the label out. And they're all sized to fit inside of the egg of the bird. So they're varying sizes. Because a lot of birds are labeled, you would put something inside the egg to label it.
Oh, wow.
Because what else are you going to do, right? You're not going to fix it on the outside with glue. And so I looked at it's really cool that there are pictures of it online. I thought that was really.
So that's like a message in an egg.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Right.
Seriously.
And then
how do you get it out?
I know.
with tweezers.
Okay.
Okay.
And then I had to look more because there's a whole series of H.W. Marsdens, and try to figure out which one this one was, who collected these birds. And this one made me sad because his son, same name but went by the nickname Bert. He died on September 11th, 1918, from wounds in the battle in World War I in Flanders, France. So his 20-year-old son died in World War I. And there's I love graveyards, which I know sounds really strange, but graveyards are like trees of life for me. I love to see how everything's connected. And there's his gravestone, the dad, his gravestone has him, his wife, his son, and their daughter who died when she was, just 7 years old or something like that. And they're all they're all labeled together. So I like that. It's like a gravestones signifying a tree of life. I like to see, it just makes me kind of make stories up about how they might have lived or,
right.
What they might have done. Or maybe how sad they might have been that they lost both of their children.
Yeah.
Before they ever got to be really adults.
And where are
There
they
you go.
buried, Shannon?
They are buried in England. I copied down a picture of the gravestone. Let me find it. Where is it?
So that's kind of, the thing about these collections, like Shannon's saying, is they're put together by many, many, many different people over the course of over a century now. I mean, it's amazing.
That is amazing.
And Tucson so Phoenix actually didn't exist basically back in the 1850s. There was not much there. It was mostly the Gila Indians, the Tohono O'odham, in that area along the Salt River and the Gila River, and so, but a lot of the early specimens came from military folks that were stationed at places like Fort Lowell in Tucson.
Oh, cool.
Oh.
Very cool.
John, did you have any javelinas near you where you grew up, or were those in a different part of the state?
No, they're all the way through there. You don't,
Okay.
it's funny. I would have said we didn't. I think there are more around now than there were when I was really young,
Okay.
and a lot of that's just that they've sort of gotten more used to coming down into places like the northern part of Tucson, which abuts the Santa Catalina Mountains. And so people see them pretty regularly.
Yeah.
They're amazing. Did you guys see any?
They are amazing.
We did, yeah.
Oh,
We
cool.
saw 'em- yeah, we saw maybe like a dozen or so of them, both adults and little babies, like crossing the road. Like our car stopped and we saw a bunch of them cross, like just like
Yes.
it was dark out, so it was kind of like with our headlights or whatever. But we were really excited.
Yes.
That's cool.
Yeah, they
yeah.
are so cute. Yeah.
I just sent you guys the picture of the grave. I don't know if it's come
Oh,
through yet.
awesome.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah.
Cool.
So what other birds did you see around the trash container?
Oh, let me grab my list.
That's like, yeah.
So, we saw a lot of, what did we see around there? We saw a Bewix wren.
Nice.
Yeah. We saw some, bush tits. We saw, I'm trying to think what we saw like specifically around there.
We saw a lot of mourning doves.
Mourning
Shannon's
doves.
favorites.
Well, again,
We saw-
I love pointing out that bird occurs in all the lower 48 states.
Yeah, it has the
Mm.
possibility
it's-
of annoying every person in the United States
Every
at any
American.
given time.
Yes.
And
Shannon, it was like our first bird that we saw when we went to this area behind the trash dump, or our
Yeah.
little birding spot that we found, that we looked out and we heard it and saw it. We were like, oh, we've got to send Shannon a picture.
Shannon, yes.
And then we
Yeah.
saw a lot more cool stuff after that, but it was funny. That was like the first thing.
Yes.
that bird does so well around. So Gambel's quail, they're also something that's again, I think, gotten more accustomed to being around cities and in suburbs and over time, and so you start seeing them, especially if you leave native vegetation for them. So I think a lot of that has to do with what they eat, but then people also will throw out bird seed and they'll come into bird feeders and chow down.
Gosh.
Mm.
I can't imagine seeing one of those in your yard, like at your feeder. That'd be so cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Your mom has pictures of them in her yard, right?
She does. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
cool.
She lives in a townhouse. It doesn't have a whole lot of vegetation or anything around, but it's in her
Well,
flower
but-
pots or coming around the back. She does live on a golf course, so there's, area for them
And
to
what they
run
would
around.
How cool.
Well, what they did in a lot of these areas is they left the vegetation along the arroyos or the stream beds that come out of the mountains. And if you do that, then the birds have a place to go and roost and then come out and forage. And I still think, even though it's debatable whether they actually need open water or access to water to drink, it probably doesn't hurt. And so they do pretty well in those mosaics where there's native vegetation left in throughout the Southwest. You guys probably saw a lot of that up in Sedona, where they've left a lot of habitat in between the houses and things.
Mhm.
You're right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So now I also learned about William Gambel because I wanted to figure
Oh,
out
yeah.
how. Do you know much about him, John?
Yeah, a little bit.
wanted to hear
So he
about this.
died at age 26, and he was clearly like a child protege. And he was associated with with Jason's place of employment, the Academy of Natural Sciences in Philadelphia. And he worked with Thomas Nuttall, who is a famous bird person. Lots of birds are named Nuttall's whatever after him. And when he was 18 in 1841, he traveled to California, and he was the first botanist to collect in Santa Fe and then and further west in California. But he also studied birds too. So imagine that at 18 to just go like that. And he actually changed the spelling of his name, and it turns out nobody knows why, because I wanted to know why he spelled it E-L, but his dad
Right.
spelled it L-E. So,
Hmm.
and I couldn't find out why he might have changed the spelling of his name, whether that was purposeful or accidental. I don't know.
I think he didn't like gambling.
I'm sure that's right,
Yeah.
John. But he kind of fell on poor financial times. So, being a botanist or an ornithologist didn't make him rich. Well, doesn't today either, but it didn't then either. And he decided to go to medical school in 1845. He got a medical degree in 1848, got married, and was going to establish a medical practice in California. So he was clearly had a lot of wanderlust, and he was pretty brave and bold at that point, right? So he was going across the country. He had shipped all his stuff. He was going across the country, and he changed parties that he was with from one place, set of people who he thought was moving too quickly, and then he moved in with another set of people, but they weren't as competent. Anyways, and he ended up trying to help a bunch of people in a typhoid outbreak as he was crossing over to California, and he ended up getting sick and dying. So he died kind of along the way trying to establish his medical practice. So, and again, he was 26 when he died, so that was pretty young.
Wow.
Jeez.
I think most 18-year-olds are equipped to just be chucked out into the world of the U.S. at that time and make them their way all the way across the country, start collecting things.
Yeah.
I'd rather be 18 to 25, I think, in those situations than much older. I remember as a kid just thinking, I mean, you guys could, if you look at areas like Sedona, can you imagine trying to cross that in a wagon of some kind? I mean, it's
No.
No. Seriously. We went to, we did a day trip to this place called Jerome, Arizona, and it's famous as like a mining town, and it's got a bunch of kind of Wild West history. Like, our tour guide told us of an instance where Billy the Kid and Wyatt Earp had an interaction at a brothel in Jerome, Arizona, and it had like lots of fun stories like that. But to get to Jerome, you have to. RJ was driving. I basically had my head between my knees. Like, it was so scary. You have to go like way in the mountains, and these are paved, really nice roads, but you're really wrapping the side of the mountain, and it's like a cliff on the side. And I thought, like, how in the heck did like Billy the Kid and Wyatt Earp and all these people like hang out here? I mean, and then RJ was like, there weren't a lot of brothels. You had to you have to work hard to get.
They went where the entertainment was.
We recently watched a documentary, kind of a docudrama thing on that. Do you remember? Was that Netflix, John? I think
it was.
It was really, really good.
Oh.
I didn't know
What
much.
was it?
Cool.
I didn't know much about that at the time, but
Oh, we'll have to look that up.
Yeah.
let me
Yeah,
see.
We love.
well, what you guys are going to have to do is go back to Arizona, because you experienced like north central Arizona, which is like the first semi-cool place, and then the really nice stuff is down south.
Oh,
Okay.
nice,
He
nice.
says.
That's where John was created.
Yeah, here it is. It's called Wyatt Earp and the Cowboy War, and it is on Netflix.
Oh, cool.
Oh, cool.
We've
And it was-
seen the icon for that.
We
It's good.
ended
It's
up
very
That's
good.
Yeah,
Oh,
we
awesome.
it was a binge thing where you couldn't stop until, but except for John gets tired easy at night.
Yeah.
So we had to stop,
mean,
and I promised not to watch it while he was not awake, because I would have stayed up all night watching it.
Oh, you're good,
I
Shannon.
mean, I mean, the one thing that drives home from my perspective is, in spite of the fact that you think of these areas as parts of the Wild West and isolated, what that documentary brings across is actually how connected they already were with things that were going on in the eastern U.S. And that was something that, growing up as a kid in Arizona, I didn't really think about very much.
Yeah,
That's really interesting.
the influence of the time it takes for information to travel from one place to another place plays a substantial role in that documentary. It's pretty interesting.
Very cool.
Cool.
Oh,
But
I
yeah,
love recommendations.
I definitely think it's worth watching.
Nice.
For sure.
Cool. Yeah, we're
Nice.
totally into all that history stuff, especially of the West. So
Yes.
we'll definitely check that out.
Yes.
Yeah.
We're so nerdy.
No, no way. That's cool.
That's how we.
Yes,
when we go
way.
somewhere new, we immediately want to learn like the history of everything.
Mm.
So like I don't know, in Sedona, we went the first day to the museum there, and then Amanda found this Jerome place, and we were just like fascinated by it. So it's like birds and history are what we care about when we travel.
Yeah.
And it's a beautiful town in a lot of ways too. Up in the
Yeah.
Jerome. Yeah.
Yeah.
Have you been there,
Yeah.
John?
a long time ago.
Very cool. Yeah. It reminded us a lot of Galena, Illinois, in that they said it was kind of a ghost town. And then in the 1960s, a bunch of artists, and they called them hippies, came in and took over the town. And now it's this like artists commune and really a big tourist destination. But yeah, it was so cool. So
Yeah.
cool.
Right? So when you get down to southern Arizona, we'll get you down to Bisbee, which is another mining town that has been taken over by artisans over time.
Oh, very
Okay.
cool. That sounds
Cool.
awesome.
So
Yeah.
because of hockey, we have ended up in a lot of small towns all over the U.S. with Pete playing hockey, and so our vacations kind of became that for the most part. And every place we go, I'm always looking for something that makes it unique, whether that's some really interesting coffee shop, a museum, an art store, a candy store, a chocolate store, jams or jellies or something. What is the unique food from that place? Because I'm not eating at Chili's or Olive Garden or something like that. So I'll make reservations for the rest of the team to eat there. But we're way more adventurous than that, finding something really special or different about every place. So that's a lot of what our vacations, I put that in quotes, end up being.
That's awesome.
It makes it fun. Like you go somewhere that you know nothing about, and if you find something that makes it unique, it's like, I don't know, then you always associate it with that place and
Yes.
feel like you know a little bit more about it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
almost every place has something, some quirk, some unique little thing that they do that they're known for. There aren't very many. Well, there's only one place we've been that doesn't seem to have that. I
Are
won't
you
name.
allowed to say what place this is?
I will not name the place, but
You can tell us after we're
Pete has
recording.
played in how many states? 14, 18? He's played hockey in a lot of states.
20.
A lot of 20
Oh,
states.
wow.
So
Yeah.
Wow.
Very cool.
It's a lot of traveling.
I was to say, yeah. And what a fun way to travel. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So circling back to Gambel's Quail, did you get to hear him call at all?
We did.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A couple times. So that was really exciting.
Yeah.
The first time we saw him, it was only like at dusk, and then we didn't see him the following night, so we were worried that they had like moved on. And then the following morning, we were out by the dumpster again and watching a bunch of other birds, and then could hear the Gambel's quail like kind of off in the distance. And then they made their way towards us, and we got to see him. So
Yeah.
their call was so cool.
So
Yeah.
I guess they're
Yeah.
pretty active when they feed at dusk and at dawn, and then the accounts say that they laze the rest of the day or something like that.
Oh,
Oh,
that's the life.
yeah. That's what Amanda and I did too.
Yeah.
Try not to boil to death, I suppose.
And here, I can play their call real quick too. I've got it pulled up. See if this works. Is that coming through?
It is.
Yeah.
It's coming. It sounds great.
Yeah.
And I was just going to say, we've been watching this show called Dark Winds,
Oh, yeah.
which is a mystery, and they were playing Gambel's Quail in the background, and at first I thought that's too
Oh.
far north because it takes place up on the Navajo reservation, which is up on the New Mexico, Colorado, Utah border.
Oh.
But coming back to your comments about the distribution of Gambel's quail, they actually get up into the dry areas of southern Utah.
Oh, so
cool.
cool. So cool.
That's definitely worth watching, too.
I have been watching that a little bit on my own while RJ's at work, and I'm so into it. Yeah, you guys had a good suggestion there. Yeah, it's really can suck you in.
Well, I'm happy with their vocalizations in the background.
Yeah, and you think, John, you think, because that's shot on location, do you think that is just naturally occurring?
Good question. Actually, you never know. I mean, Shannon's mentioned California quail a couple times, the sister taxon to this bird, and that's calling in regularly in the background of the old MASH episodes, because they used to record them in these places in California on these lots there.
I would bet it's natural, because you have to pay to use things that are not natural.
Oh, that's a good point.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
Yeah, anybody that recorded the Gambel's quail is going to get a residual from if they sold it to some studio. And if you go out and record it yourself, you don't have to pay for it.
And that's the reason why you hear all kinds of weird things in weird parts of places in movies, because they are not buying the rights to play the right sounds in places, so you end up with the wrong sounds in places.
Yes.
Kookaburras all over the world.
Wren tits everywhere.
Yeah. Kookaburras and loons and, some of the things you hear everywhere actually pretty much are everywhere. Red-tailed hawks, for example, but, loons aren't everywhere.
Yeah.
And when they play red-tailed hawk, they're pretending like it's a bald eagle anyway.
Right. Yeah. And that reminds me, I'm not sure if we talked about this, but RJ and we watch Yellowstone, and in one episode, they had a bird represent John Dutton after he died. Hopefully that's not spoiling it for anybody. And we looked it up, and it turned out to be some type of bird from, we thought it was supposed to look like a red-tailed hawk. That's what we thought. And it ended up being like a bird from Africa. RJ, do you remember this, right?
Yeah, I'm trying to look up what it was.
Was it an auger buzzard?
Yes. That's what it was. Yes. And we went down this rabbit hole of like that, and they said because of American laws, you can't have they couldn't use a red-tailed hawk for that scene, but they could use an auger buzzard or whatever. Does that make sense,
gosh.
John?
So it does now that you're saying it, because I've seen auger buzzards in ads before, and it's always a thought, why did somebody have an auger buzzard? But I guess
you don't have to have permit to have an auger buzzard, right? So if it's a North American and a migratory bird, you can't possess them. So
that's what it was. Thank you, Shannon.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so you end up with things that you can possess which are not native to North America, for example. So you can. It's
we saw a whole special on the Seattle Seahawks have their mascot is an auger buzzard, which is clearly not from Seattle.
Yeah.
But yeah, that must be what you're saying. You can't possess, I think, is it an osprey? Is that what a Seattle Seahawk would be? Or
that's what I think.
That's a good question. But I think of it as a kind of almost like a mythical
like a sea hag. I'm just kidding.
I never thought of that before. What it's supposed to be.
The Seahawk, yeah.
Well, I don't think it's an auger buzzard. Well, I think we're getting close on time. We do have a mailbag question. Do you guys want to get into that? Did you see? I said this not long before.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so this is from. So there's a flower farm in Dunlap, Illinois, called Winking Titmouse Farm, and they sent us some pictures and said, "We've been finding owl pellets below our fence posts. Thought you might enjoy these." And they sent a couple pics. Nice to share with people that think it's cool too. And so we can post these on our
They
social.
have no idea what they did. They don't. This is like the bizarre things that end up happening from that, which is that, we want to know what that owl is. Because there's a crawfish in the
there's
claw.
See if
it's
I can
like
put
an
it up there.
amazing pellet.
Yep. You
Yeah.
can very clearly see that claw.
Yeah.
So of North American owls, the one species that I know of that's kind of considered to eat almost anything is barred owl, which is certainly a possibility for where they're from outside of Peoria. And the one thing is, I think of barred owls as being sort of woodland owls that wouldn't necessarily eat stuff on a fence post. So maybe it's something else. Maybe there are things that I don't know about great horned owls or something, but that's a really cool owl pellet.
Very cool. It had like an entire crayfish or crab in
yeah,
it.
crayfish, yeah.
Very
well,
cool.
thanks for sending that. We'll post the pictures on our social too, in case you couldn't see it in here. But yeah, if you so Winking Titmouse Farms, if you're listening too, if you happen to know what owl it was, if you've seen it or anything, let us know as well.
Absolutely.
All right. So, is there anything else on the Gambel's quail we want to talk about before we close it out?
Well, I love the fact that you guys got out to Arizona and saw some of the really cool Arizona birds, and I'm guessing you'd be willing to go back.
Yes.
Oh yeah, for sure.
We wish we were there now.
Yes. All right, I'm going to stop that.
Thanks everyone for listening. You all are incredible for being a part of this with us, so thank you. Reminder, if you have a question for us, you can reach us at podcast.birdsofafeather@gmail.com. If you're enjoying this, please leave us a review in the podcast app and share this with someone who you think would enjoy it. All right, see you all next week. Love you all.